Hey everyone, it's Lexberry, and today I want to talk about overrated games. Quite a number of video games come out every year, so there are several Game of the Year award ceremonies that name the best games that everyone should play. For the most part, a lot of these games are very decent, so being considered a Game of the Year is usually spot on. But every once in a while, there's a game that I personally think doesn't deserve the praise and popularity that people give it. So anyway, without further ado, here are 10 games that I consider to be overrated. Shadow of the Colossus I consider to be one of the most overrated games ever. It originally came out in 2005 with a remaster in 2011 and a remake in 2018. People only give it high praise. I played the remake when I had my PS4, and while it was a decent game, it's not one of the best games ever made, not even close. The game is basically a puzzle/adventure game that has you take down 16 colossi in the game world, and each one has a different strategy required in order to defeat it. This concept seems good on paper, but when I played it, I was extremely disappointed with the experience. For one, I rank replayability very high when it comes to purchasing games, and this game has none at all. The only gameplay is taking down the 16 colossi, and none of them have a complex strategy that a kid couldn't remember, so once you know how to defeat each colossus, the whole game becomes pretty pointless. Not only that, but the game world is barren and empty. People seem to praise this especially, but I don't understand why. Which would you rather play? A game with nothing in the open world like this one, or one with a lot of extras and side activities, like the Batman Arkham series? I know I choose the latter. On top of those two things, people also point out the graphics as a high point, but the graphics aren't supposed to make the game, right? Saints Row and Saints Row 2 are classic games from the past console generations, and personally, I think Saints Row 2 is one of the best games of the decade. When I saw that Saints Row the Third was coming out, and after seeing gameplay, I thought, okay, it's weird, but still somewhat like the previous games. When Saints Row 4 came out, however, I was like, no way in hell. Saints Row 4 is such a ridiculous game where everything, including the story, goes off the rails. I mean, there's superpowers, virtual reality, aliens. What started out as a Grand Theft Auto clone with gangs turned into something completely different, and that's not always a good thing, with this being a prime example. The DLC only made it worse, bringing in hell and magic to add to the other ridiculous stuff. It's unfortunate there will never be a game like Saints Row 2 or a remake of it in the franchise. But then again, if the franchise is only going to release games like Saints Row 4, it's better to let the franchise die. Who hasn't heard of Tetris? That Russian puzzle game that's probably one of the most successful video games of all time. It originally came out in 1984 for a Soviet Union computer, but since then the game has spread around the world and will most likely never go away. My issue with this game is that it gets boring after a while because the gameplay is so simple, but that's understandable since it's a product of the times. I haven't played Tetris in 10 years because of this reason. There's just other games I'd rather play instead, but I don't think this is a bad game at all. It may seem like cheating to rank all of these games together, but it's my list and I consider all these games to be basically the same. It doesn't matter if it's Walking Dead, Batman, Guardians of the Galaxy, or Game of Thrones. These are all identical, with the only difference being the name. It doesn't matter what game it is, because the gameplay boils down to watching a movie that has button inputs every once in a while, which goes on from start to end. I get that the story is supposed to be the main draw of these games. After all, that's why The Walking Dead was so popular, with Clementine being an immediate fan favorite. But games still need gameplay. That's why I love games like Horizon Zero Dawn and Bioshock, since not only are the stories phenomenal, but the gameplay is amazing as well. Telltale games only have one of these, and this means that there is no replayability for these games either. It doesn't matter what choices you make in these games, the story turns out the same, with the only difference being a few lines of dialogue here and there, if any at all. And I don't know about you, but I'm not going to drop money on a game that I can play multiple times but only enjoy once, so it's no wonder the studio shut down. The Assassin's Creed series is a game series I was wary of for a long time, since like Call of Duty and Far Cry, new games come out every year, and I consider this to be a serious red flag. Chances are that if a franchise releases games every year, they are more likely to have bugs and glitches because the development time will be rushed, and this was clearly seen with Assassin's Creed Unity. Out of curiosity, I tried Assassin's Creed Black Flag because it's considered one of the best in the franchise next to Assassin's Creed 2, and I find pirate history extremely interesting. I played the game to completion, getting all the achievements and finding every collectible. Once I was done though, I wasn't super impressed. Sure, tying the story to actual historical events was cool, and it could look past the anime stuff with great struggle. But overall, I just felt the game was lacking, and that's probably due to the series having one game per year. If the game had a bit more development time, I probably wouldn't feel this way. But if this is one of the best games the series has to offer, I'd rather look elsewhere to spend my money. Noire is another one of those games that brought something to video games that no one had seen before, in this case facial motion capture. in order to tell when suspects are lying or telling the truth in a case. I played LA Noire when I had an Xbox 360, and it was a decent game, I have to admit. Being a detective in the 1940s and solving cases was a cool premise, and the storyline was entertaining. My problem with this game is the replay value, like so many of the others in this list. Since the story is so rigid and the main draw is the suspect interrogation, once you know all the answers, LA Noire loses its substance. There's not really a point to exploring the downtown LA map since it's pretty empty, and there's no hidden stuff, save for a few basic crimes that you'll likely run into anyway during the main missions. So as a result, I only played this game once, and will never pick it up again. Animal Crossing is one of those games that people seem to get addicted to and play for hours on end for weeks or months, but then get bored and drop it to never come back. While I may seem biased since I have never played or bought a game in this franchise, it's because there's nothing to interest me. Based on what I have read about and seen people play, you do various simple activities in order to pay off a loan shark raccoon, and once you do, you take out another loan for a bigger house, and repeat the process. This series of games seems to lack an overall purpose, and as a result, I can understand why people stop playing. When Animal Crossing New Leaf came out, I guess the formula had changed slightly by making the player character a mayor of a town. But other than that, it seemed to be the same game every single time. In fact, I feel like Jello Apocalypse's video about Animal Crossing sums it up perfectly, especially its flaws. If games are going to introduce a sequel, they should at least have the courage to try something new, but Animal Crossing just restricts itself. Ocarina of Time is considered by many Zelda fans to be the best in the franchise, even with Breath of the Wild's popularity. Personally, I prefer Wind Waker, but that's just me. I played Ocarina of Time when it was in the Nintendo eShop for Wii U, and I thought it was okay. I could see why people liked it, and how it was the basis for a lot of things in future 3D Zelda games, especially Twilight Princess. While it was good, I don't think it's phenomenal, and after being over 20 years old, the game does not age super well. For one, I find it extremely lame that you can only ride your horse in one portion of the map. Thankfully, Twilight Princess fixed this. Also, the water temple is such an annoying mechanic, and it's so confusing that most people need to use a guide to get through it, since the map is practically no help at all. I understand this seems nitpicky, and at the time, the game was groundbreaking, but now everything that Ocarina of Time did, modern games do as well. I do like Ocarina of Time and play it every once in a while, but I don't think it deserves to stay on the pedestal that many die-hard Zelda fans have superglued it to. Uncharted is one of those series I never really heard much about, and it's understandable considering that for a long time I didn't even have a PlayStation. I got the trilogy as a Christmas gift on PS4, so I played through them all, and when I was done, I thought the games were definitely lacking, at least the first one. I was expecting a game like Tomb Raider with a male Lara Croft, full of exploration and exciting gameplay. What I got instead was a painfully linear game that composed of shooting all the enemies until they were dead, then continuing on until the next firefight. The game was composed of nothing else, save for a few puzzles with painfully easy solutions that are given to the player so that they know what to do. Uncharted 2 was much better compared to the first one, building on the aspect of sneak attacks and combat, and I thought the story and setting were much better. The third entry in the series, however, was a drop in quality. Sure, fighting the brutes was new, but other than that, there wasn't much else compared to the second. I didn't like the direction Nathan Drake's character went in the third game, and the main villain just seemed weak compared to the second. There wasn't even some big treasure like in the first two games either, just a bunch of random ruins in the desert, and since Drake is supposed to be a treasure hunter, why is he even bothering? At least the fourth game got things back on track, but I didn't play it since there are multiplayer trophies, and I tend to avoid games that include them, unless they are really good, like The Last of Us. I'm honestly surprised the series has done so well, since it's all spawned from that first Uncharted, but I guess that fits with the motto, greatness from small beginnings. Yes, although I am a huge fan of the Bioshock franchise and consider the games to be some of the best in history, Bioshock Infinite does not hold a candle to Bioshock 1 and 2, with good reason. What made the first two games so good was not only the story but the gameplay, the setting, the themes. Everything about it was memorable. Exploring a hellish underwater city was exciting, and the developers at 2K Games were not able to do it just once but twice. Bioshock Infinite tried something new, however. Instead of taking place underwater, the game takes place in the sky, and instead of exploring a somewhat open-world map, the game is restrictingly similar with very little opportunity to explore. The story was okay, albeit a little weird, but it was not of the same quality as the first two games. The only major character in Infinite that was well developed and interesting was Elizabeth, and she can't carry the game on her own. Not only that, but being restricted with only 2 guns was a hindrance, and if you had picked the wrong loadout, some fights were practically impossible. All in all, Bioshock Infinite does not deserve the praise it gets, and while it is decent enough, the first 2 games eclipse it by just being that much better. So that's my list. I feel like I'm going to get a lot of complaints from people defending these games and franchises. Please understand this is only my opinion as a singular gamer, and everyone is entitled to their own ideas. Anyway, thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time for another video.